Hi guys, welcome back to another BigLipz podcast. This is episode 4, and today we're going to be talking about uh, movies that maybe don't conform to their specific genre, or movies that reinvent the genre that they are kind of associated with, or movies that generally don't seem to have a particular genre. Obviously, this is something that could be applied to a lot of movies, so we've just picked 6, hopefully a few different genres, so that it gives us a bit of a scope. As always, my name is Catherine Maurice, joined by my good friend Sam Macaulay Blair. Where both of us are kind of current and former film students, basically just looking for something creative to do while we're stuck in the house. So this is what we came up with.
As the time.
As always, we will put a list of all the films that we've talked about in the description, and then if anyone has any suggestions of anything that they would want to see us talking about, or any ideas or anything like that, just fire that in the comments. That would be cool. So basically, to start off with, we're going to be talking about my favourite crime movie ever, and arguably one of my favourite movies ever, which is, of course, the amazing Zootropolis, which is 2016 Disney movie. So yeah, Sam, what were your thoughts?
I've similar to you. I've always had quite a love for this film. I remember being genuinely a lot more excited for it coming out than most animated films, and I like animated films.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it does a really good job of being a kids film, but sort of telling quite a nuanced and relevant story. Obviously there's a lot of subtext in the film, a large sort of racial subtext element, and I think it's also just a very well written police procedural movie. You have the dynamic of the sort of two main characters, Judy Hopps and Nick. They're endlessly fun to watch. Even just the setting is really creative. Obviously coming up with the idea of the city, Zootropolis, and just the mechanics of that. But using it to sort of tell a story that has a message, I thought was a really smart move.
Yeah.
And I think it's just quite fun to see a kids film play on some more sort of serious and weighty topics, and delve deeper into a subject that you wouldn't really expect kids movies to touch. You don't really expect them to go into full police movie territory, but more than that, you don't really expect them to do it and sort of impart a message at the same time. Obviously, there is the movie's at once fun, but serious when it sort of needs to be. And sort of employs a lot of you have it manages to cram a lot of police sort of tropes and imagery and whatnot in it. Obviously you have Judy sort of rising through the ranks initially, being going to the sort of police training academy. You have her then being given parking duty. You have her being discriminated against, but it allows you to sort of show different facets of the police force and of the city. And yeah, her partnering obviously with the character of Nick, who is a fox, is just a sort of genius idea in and of itself. But the fact that they use that to then again really hammer home the message of not judging something by not judging a book by its cover. There we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, the movie just moves at a really brisk pace. Has a lot of good twists and turns. And yeah, manages to sort of tick a lot of boxes. I particularly enjoy just again the way that it sort of moves through locations. And I mean, my favorite scene is always the DMV scene with all the sloths.
Oh, classic.
But yeah, right down to the end, it is just, again, said it before, but a very intelligent film, and I kind of love the use of the sort of wire, the recorded confession,
or a little
at the end.
carrot pen.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really sort of fun way, and a sort of unexpected way to kind of close out or resolve the plot. But yeah, I think it does a very good job of. It could have just been a sort of fun kids movie, But yeah, it really pushes past that and has some sort of darker moments.
Yeah.
There's obviously a sort of like mob element. There is a genuine danger in the film. There is a bit of violence, and yeah, I think it will entertain people, in particular kids, but also get them thinking, get them talking, and will leave a lasting impression, which the movie should do.
Yeah. I think it's funny, the first time I watched it, I hadn't really heard anything about it.
Oh, really?
I just somehow missed it. And then I was watching it the first time, and I remember watching it, and I was like, oh my god, this movie is intense. Like, there's the one particular bit when they're Judy's on the train, and there's like a little bunny family, and then a tiger comes down and sits next to them, and the mum like pulls the little baby bunny
Yeah.
in, and it's so like, do you know what I was watching, and I was like, god, this movie is relevant. Which is,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's funny, especially for a Disney movie where they can sometimes be pretty heavily critiqued for the whole kind of like princess thing, and oh, as long as you stay gorgeous and whatnot, you'll meet your prince and then he'll take you away and you live in a
Yeah.
castle. Whereas this is very much like, here are these like real life issues, but they've put it in such a way where it doesn't seem overly preachy, maybe because they're
Yeah.
animals. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as well, Judy is, again, going back to the kind of Disney princess trope, Judy is like feminist icon. She is. She's.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's funny as well because she's had this dream. She wanted to be a police officer, so she went out and she did it. And then I think it's really nice as well when she realizes that it's become like tainted. She just quits. Yeah. She's like, no, I'm not having anything to do with that anymore. That's not what I wanted to do. And she quits and goes home, which I think is really interesting for a Disney movie anyway.
Yeah, it's a really powerful move. Like sticking by her morals to like basically at the expense of her dream.
Yeah.
And something that she's put in like so much work for. She is happy to not happy to, but she will cast it aside for what she feels are like the right reasons.
I think it's funny because I was reading things where they were talking about other Disney movies where they were like almost there with movies like Wreck-It Ralph or Big Hero 6 and things like that, but then Zootropolis just kind of pushed it over the edge into like, they're telling actual stories, but they're doing it in the kind of Disney way, which is really funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I found really interesting was I was having a look at the sort of production side of things with the movie, and I was quite surprised that like I would have assumed that from its conception, like the point of making the movie was to sort of relay the message it relays. But like looking at the production, there was like I went through like loads of different stages. And initially it was going to be like a 1960s set like spy thriller.
Oh yeah.
with like talking animals. And it's quite crazy that it kind of evolved so far off concept. But I think like in the end became like a much more powerful film. Like you say, and again like it does have like really strong characters at its core.
Yeah.
And again, even just like the idea of like Judy being willing to like walk away from the police force is something that I think like is important to see. Like there's sort of like I think an expectation sometimes, or like a thought that people have that like, okay, well the system's broken, but what can you really do? You just got to like live inside it, work inside it. You can't, unfortunately, it's a shame, but that's the way the world is, and you can't change anything. But yeah, like it's refreshing to see a character like actually put their foot down. Especially after the movie's done so much to show you how important, like how big a step that is for that character.
Yeah, how hard she worked to get there.
Exactly.
I think it's funny as well, like it's very, like we were talking about it being like a crime movie, it's so, like you were talking about the stakes being pretty high, like it's they're not just high for the specific whoever it is that's getting targeted, and then or whoever it is that they're attacking, and it's like high for the whole of the like predator population.
Yeah.
Because if it continues, then no, we can't trust predators, so they'll all need to be locked up, or they'll all need to be banished, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's a nice sort of like indication of like extremism and how fear can like so quickly drive people into just like really reckless and really careless and really dangerous, thoughtless action.
I think it's
Yeah,
funny as well.
nice...
There's even that scene where they're having their little protest, and one of the animals says something to another animal, and she comes back and says, "Oh," he says something like, "Go back to whatever it is," and she says, I'm from the savannah," and I just think that was really funny because that's the sort of thing that, like, the stuff like that does happen in real life where people are like, "Go back to this country,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, that's not even where I'm from. Part of
Yeah,
I was born in
exactly.
this country." Do you know what I mean?
I know, exactly. And again, it's a really, again, sort of subtle way to, I guess, it's a subtle way to like comment on that, but also teach that to kids that are watching it, for like who don't really have much of a concept of that. That like, yeah, history isn't as obvious as it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's just impressive how, like, it really does feel like, that's the nice thing about the movie. It doesn't feel like it's talking down to you at all, or like it doesn't feel like it's a movie like that is necessarily for just kids. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a Breaking Bad reference in there.
Yeah.
As well, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's just like, that was really, I remember like seeing that for the first time. I was like, that was really unexpected.
Yep, 100%. And then there's obviously like the Godfather references as well, with the little vole who's hysterical. I just think that's so funny. And obviously there's the whole thing where, like that whole bit where they go, "Oh, you've interrupted me on the day of my daughter's wedding," kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like they stole it verbatim. And what child is going to have, especially nowadays because it's a lot older, the movie, but what child is going to have seen The Godfather? Do you know what I mean?
I know. It's quite funny. It's quite a funny way of like extracting laughs to reference a really dark adult movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, it also the nice thing about that being in there is like it does then, it allows the movie to be revisited and to be rewatched as people get older. And I think that's, again, when it's telling such like a strong message, it is quite important that it has that. Like, it must be quite nice. I imagine there will be kids who eventually grow up and revisit that movie as adults, having watched it as children, and see like so much more in it.
That's true.
They first did.
That's true. I just think it's so. I just remember like vividly the first time I watched it. I was so like, and I watched it when it came out 2016. So I'd have been like, what, 20, 21, and I watched it, and I was properly like engrossed in it. And then the twist happened, and I was like, oh, I can't believe that.
I know.
And I was watching it. I was watching it at my mum's house, and I had guessed. I was like, "It's something to do with that sheep. She's something to do with it." And she'd already seen it, and then it happened, and Mum was like, "You were right."
Well called. I don't think I saw it coming.
No, I just thought there was something fishy about her.
I don't actually remember my first like experience of it, because I remember that I went to see it in the cinema, and I went to see it I did like a double bill where I went to see that and Kung Fu Panda 3 at the same time. And despite both of them being like animated kids films, they do feel like they sit really far apart on like a spectrum.
Yeah.
And yeah, like ultimately, like it's I was surprised at just how much there was to kind of chew on with Zootropolis, and how much you kind of walk away thinking about. And I think that's the thing. Like, I think I was so kind of like wowed and engrossed in like what the movie was saying that I did kind of like, I don't think I was even really thinking that much about like where the plot was going. I think I just kind of allowed the movie to take me along for the ride, which is you know, a nice way to kind of experience it, because yeah, like there are lots of twists and turns. And again, the movie goes to some like unexpected places, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone who knows me is sick hearing me talking about Zootropolis, to be honest.
I don't think you can talk about it too much, to be fair.
I would agree, but some people wouldn't. So on that note, move on to our next movie, which is actually a movie that I watched and then studied in uni the first time when I went to Stirling Uni.
Oh, nice.
And that movie is Thelma and Louise, which basically is like your classic American road movie, but it's like a buddy movie kind of thing. But the leads are two women, which had never really been done before, and there's obviously a lot more movies about like groups of women and women friends and stuff like that now, but I still don't think it's, or nothing's kind of came up to par to be with kind of Thelma and Louise on that level.
Yeah, I'm not aware of there being like anything else, and I wonder if that's just because Thelma and Louise made such an impact that it's almost like people are now kind of too afraid to like revisit those waters.
It might be that kind of thing we were talking about last podcast, where if there was even a movie that came out that was two women traveling about in a car, people would be like, that's not as good as Thelma and Louise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the movie is just like iconic from start to finish.
It's good as well. I'm a big fan of Ridley Scott, and it's funny that he seems to jump like from genre to genre. So he'll do like Alien, which is like a sci-fi horror, and then he'll go and do Thelma and Louise, which is like a buddy movie, and then he'll do Gladiator. He's like all over the shop.
Yeah, it is genuinely impressive. Like, and the man's output is like insane. Like he produces a movie like basically every year.
Yeah.
And I've watched like a lot of interviews and stuff with him and like roundtable discussions, and I find it quite funny because you see there's a roundtable discussion I watched where like yeah, like a bunch of directors were sort of talking about the pains they've had making movies, and like, you know, the things that go wrong, and how much how many nightmares they have while they're like in the middle of making a movie. And the person hosting the roundtable just asked Ridley Scott, you know, like, well, what was your most difficult production? And he was just like, yeah, none of them. He's like, they're all easy. He's like,
That's
apparently
amazing.
his background in like shooting adverts, he was like, it just prepared me for everything. So like, there's never like a problem that I don't see coming. Like, I'm always just like on top of stuff.
That's so funny.
And I'll always kind of deal with it. So yeah, like, it is the guy. I mean, yeah, the man is absolutely like a legend. And like you say, like it is ridiculous. Like, how much, yeah, how sort of like how my god, how constant like his output is. But on top of that, yeah, the fact you can never tell where he's going next.
Yeah.
Like when you sit down to watch one of his movies, it could be anything. And it means that he does have like some genuine like masterpieces. And all for like different reasons.
Definitely. I think what I always find interesting about Thelma and Louise, funnily enough, I studied it while I was studying Alien as well.
Yeah.
So Ridley Scott just likes him some female characters, which I appreciate.
Yeah, he does indeed.
I remember reading about it, and apparently when it first came out, there was a lot of like controversy around it. Like, people were like, "Oh, why these women are like bad," or things like that. But they're doing the things that men would traditionally do in movies, where they'll just like shoot people and rob places.
Yeah.
But because it was women, people were like, "Oh, that's horrifying." And I remember reading somewhere, Gina Davis had been quoted, who plays Thelma, was quoted saying that if you were offended by the movie, then you're sympathizing with the wrong characters, is what she said. And she's right, because there's maybe with the exception of two male characters, none of the men in the movie treat them with any kind of like respect, or one of them tries to rape Thelma, and then there's the horrible like truck driver guy, and then there's Brad Pitt who steals from them. So I think it's funny that it goes so far in the opposite direction, where not only is it the movie about women, but the movies also includes all of these horrible male characters. But it doesn't seem like a movie against men. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like a kind of Brabern and Bash the Men type movie.
Exactly. I guess like you said before, like it doesn't come across as preachy in any way, but it does have a sort of strong message, and does have quite a natural. It quite naturally shows you like all different, like there's loads of different types of men, and just like the problematic sort of views and behaviors and the way they treat the women around them. And yeah, it's very much, it's very much two women riding around a man's world. And I think like I actually knew very little about the movie going in, other than like the ending, which is a really strange which is a really strange way to kind of watch it. So there's a lot of like nice surprises in there. And yeah, the messaging like overall I like really appreciated, and again I appreciated it because it just doesn't. I never felt like the movie was trying to like cram the message down your throat. It just felt incidental to the story. But yeah, like it does, and it does. You genuinely like you. I was totally on their side, Thelma and Louise. You have like so much fun watching them sort of grow as characters, watching them grow together, and watching them sort of defy everything. And the tragic thing about it, I mean, it is obviously like a very tragic story, but it doesn't play as one for a lot of it. There's like so much sort of fun and vibrancy to it. But yeah, I was sort of impressed right at the start when obviously it really sells you on the sort of inciting incident where Thelma's almost raped and Louise ends up gunning down the man who did it or tried to do it. Yeah, it did a really good job of, you're totally watching that and going, yeah, like, shoot him.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he deserves it. And then you totally buy into, because at first it's like, okay, well, you totally get why they wouldn't go to the police, and her sort of her line to Thelma of, well, the two of you were dancing, like, no one would ever believe that you tried anything.
Yeah, like, everyone saw you dancing with him.
Exactly, and it's a really scary thought. It's a really scary truth ultimately. That there's no guarantee whatsoever that they would go to the police and they would be in any way okay. And because of that, you're totally on their side when they decide to sort of turn tail and run. And I think the movie even references the fact that it's basically like a snowball effect where they end up kind of doing worse and worse and worse. But the nice thing about it is, like, the movie kind of, like, they're always generally, like, quite nice people. As mental as that is to say for two women who, like, kill a man and then commit a bunch of crimes. But yeah, like, even, when she robs the convenience store, she's so nice about it.
Yeah, she's so polite.
Yeah, she's, like, amazingly polite. Even when they're getting revenge on the trucker who's just appallingly, like, disgusting and vile to them. Yeah, even, like, there was a moment where I was like, well, they pull guns on him. I was like, are they going to gun him down? But they end up just shooting, first of all, the tires of his truck, trying to get him to apologise, and then blowing up the truck. And you very much are just like, yeah, okay, well, the guy absolutely had it coming. And even when they're sort of taken on by the police officer, which was a scene that, like, managed to be ridiculously intense for me, despite the fact that, again, I knew
the ending.
Movie was going. Yeah, it was really, really strange how, like, much I sort of bought into the suspense of that moment. But yeah, even that, like, they handle the situation so intelligently and so brilliantly. And like, you could very much have that sort of situation. You could end up walking away with, like, a dislike of those characters from the fact that they'd, like, take a police officer and, like, lock him in his trunk. But you just don't really have it in you. And again, they try to be, they're so apologetic.
Yeah, because they're even nice to him as well, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah. And it is, yeah, it's that's kind of, like, I guess, one of the biggest moments of, like, them sort of sticking the finger up to the system. But yeah, no, it's brilliant, and it's strange how sort of mixed the ending of. I mean, obviously the full emotional impact of the ending was probably robbed from me for the fact that I knew it was coming, but it does, when watching it, it's again, it's kind of crazy how that ending, the two of them effectively committing suicide, plays as, again, like, uplifting and as, like, the right thing for them to have done, despite the fact that you, like, love those characters.
I definitely think so. I remember the first time I watched that, I was pretty young, and I remember not quite understanding why they had decided to drive off the cliff, and then it was when I watched it a bit later that I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like them again are taking it into their own hands, and they're like, no, I'm not gonna let, like, a man dictate what's gonna happen, so I'll just do whatever, and then that way it's up to me, basically, or it's up to the both of them.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's such a bold move, but such a brilliant move. And yeah, it's just them refusing to, like, play by the normal men's rules anymore.
Yeah.
And again, it's terrific.
I think as well that point is very much like a great moment for, like, Thelma, because it first started and she was, like, scared of her husband, and she even, like, when they went away on the fishing trip, she like ran away while he was at work because she didn't want to tell him about it.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Yeah, her arc is sort of wonderfully done. Where, yeah, like, she sort of comes out, and it's you do very much think there's a line, isn't there, where she talks about being, like, more awake than she's ever been, and you do sort of see that you sort of see this person come to life for the first time, or for the first time in a long time, and again, it is just, like, yeah, one of the delights of the movie is you're so buy into the fact that this person needs this to happen, and again, it's just kind of ridiculous how easily the movie could have been really gritty and really sort of somber, and really bleak, but it manages to sort of retain the spirit of, like, a sort of a buddy road trip movie. while at the same time being like really violent and really like gripping, and yeah, having sort of moments of intensity and genuine like danger.
It's funny as well because I haven't seen like the movies that you always see examples of are like Easy Rider. Rain Man was another one which I've seen, but I wasn't a massive fan of.
I've not seen either.
So I think it's funny that Thelma and Louise is my favourite like buddy movie or road movie or whatever. Because I've obviously just not been interested to watch the other ones.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I've not actually seen that many like sort of buddy road trip movies. I think I've seen. There was one that I saw that was based on a John Green book that I think came out like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I think I saw that in the cinemas. And I feel like it's one of those things that it's like, even though I can't think of like any real examples of like movies like that I've seen. I still feel like I know that genre inside and out, and all the tropes that sort of come with it. And yeah, like again, like Thelma and Louise was just like, I'm sure even if I watched those other films, Thelma and Louise would be sitting like at the top of or very near the top of the pile, because it is just like, it's so well done, and it manages to be like so engaging and sort of so surprising. And again, which is weird to say of a movie where keep saying this, but I knew where it was going.
Yeah, that was like what movie were we talking about? It was one of the other podcasts we were talking about a movie, and I knew the ending, and I was still shocked by it.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah, we did a whole podcast on endings. It's funny that Thelma and Louise never came up because probably has like one of the most, if not the most iconic ending.
Yeah, especially that like freeze frame as well at the very end.
Exactly. Like it's just like everyone just knows that. And it must have been, it was one of those films, and again, Ridley Scott's quite good for this, that must have just been like amazing to see in cinemas for the first time.
Yeah.
Not having any clue what you were going into. But yeah, like massive respect for the movie, and for Ridley Scott for doing it, and for doing it really well, because there's some stunning cinematography in there as well. Like the movie looks an absolute treat. And there's like a really, really solid cast, and everyone plays a really sort of vibrant and varied character, and they all play off each other really, really well.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that's nice about it, because Thelma and Louise they're different enough for it to seem like real life that they would be friends, whereas you watch like buddy movies and they're like chalk and cheese for the sake of like argument, basically.
Yeah, they do a very good job of like, these women are friends, and they are different people, and their approaches are very different, but yeah, it sells you on the fact that they're friends and they have been friends for a long time, and you can see how that friendship works. But yeah, like it's just refreshing. It's refreshing to not have it be like them, two people that can't stand each other. Like it's nice that they have their sort of moments of conflict, but they're very sort of small, and it's very much like the two of them up against everything else.
Definitely. No, that sounds good. I think moving on, we kind of switched genres into more kind of Western territory. And this one is 2015's Bone Tomahawk, which you had seen before I had, and I went into it knowing it was going to be grim, but not quite knowing just how grim it would become, and it became very grim.
It's genuinely like, I'd like to think that I've got a high tolerance for watching things and for watching movies and scenes of movies, but yeah, obviously there's one scene in particular in that film, like towards the end, that I came close, despite the fact that I was loving the film, I came close to stopping watching it, because I was just like, that was a difficult watch. And yeah, it's one of the most effective moments I've seen for just like sending this sort of raising the tension, raising the stakes through the roof. Because at that point I was just like, these characters are done for. Like there's absolutely no choice, no chance they're getting out of this, and they're getting out of this happy. That's
like you and I were talking about it, where if I was in that situation, I would 100% have been like, pass me that whatever medicine it was, pass me that, I'm just gonna glug it down and kill myself, because I'm not even risking.
Absolutely, the balls on them to have that option of just taking the coward's way out, and to then try and actually use it to not even to like escape or anything. They try and like take a few of like the the tribesmen out, and I was just like, yeah, that's insane to me. I was like, the last thing I'd be doing would be antagonizing them. I would just be, yeah, I would be opening death's door and getting out of there before
100%.
before any of that was happening to me, or at the very least, I would be keeping it on hand to numb myself if they came anywhere near me, because like, yeah, you do not really want to be in a feeling your senses sort of moods, in that situation.
I think as well that was one of those moments where I was like watching it through my hands like that and like being like, surely that they're not doing what I think they're doing. But they were.
Exactly. And yeah, I think that's it. Like the movie manages on the sort of surface, it's a really simple tale. It's effectively just like a rescue mission, and again, it's a sort of thing that like westerns generally are. You know, there's sort of a lot. Like, they're sort of slow in pace. Again, sort of beautiful cinematography, naturally, with where they're set and the way they're sort of shot. But yeah, you kind of expect like, I guess it's just things you expect, like a sort of slow pace, and you expect sort of a bit of action, a lot of talking, but yeah, you don't really get. I don't think the movie is in many ways like a thriller, as much as it's a western, down to like, you know, like the end basically in the sort of serial killer's lair, like in sort of Silence of the Lambs or something. And you really, really do, like, it does a really good job of, when it wants to be suspenseful, being really suspenseful, and sort of creating this really, you really buy into the threat, and there's a sort of realism to it as well that is like ridiculously effective, where it's not your stylized shootouts and big action set pieces. It's like anytime there's sort of conflict, it all seems to go really, really fast and go really, really
That's
wrong.
such a good point, yeah. Yeah, there's no point where there's like close-ups of like people shooting like from the hip kind of thing and doing this thing with their gun.
Yeah, that mad stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much like, it's always a bit like messy almost, the way that it would be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, you know, like, there's what, 4 of them that set out? Is it 4 of them? 5 of them that set out?
4 of them, yeah.
On the rescue mission. 4 of them. And again, in your sort of standard western, you'd be like, well, they're more than well equipped. You know, four main characters going to rescue some people, going to rescue like a couple people from like sort of savage tribesmen, like that's gonna be easy. But it's especially when like you have like Kurt Russell as one of them, who you just naturally sort of feel safe in the presence of. And yeah, you have a character that's obviously set up as a sort of renowned Indian killer. And yeah, again, I love the fact that even if you sort of, because a lot of the movie is them sort of traveling, even if you do sort of think, okay, well, like, you know, like they know what they're doing, they're like a skilled group, the movie quickly turns that when they're basically like showing how out their depth they are, showing how sort of not inept, but just showing how, like, I guess chaotic and quick the sort of fight sequences are, and the fact that they're on like the enemy's turf, and yeah, even I can't remember the character's name, but he's the guy from Lost,
Matthew Fox, his character. I can't remember his name
Matthew
either.
Fox's character. Even when they leave him, and he's like, okay, well, I'll take a few of them out, as I go, and it doesn't even matter.
It doesn't get the chance, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think he
just gets like a tomahawk to the face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so even in his death, he doesn't manage to like take any of them down with him. Yeah, and you obviously have like one of the characters as being really old and really slow, and yeah, you're very, and obviously one of them's crippled as well. You're just like, okay, these characters like very, very quickly are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, because especially when Matthew Fox's character goes, obviously Kurt Russell's there, but he's like a kind of like aging sheriff.
Yeah.
So he's like the kind of last hope.
Yeah, exactly, and he's in imprisoned when it's just down to Patrick Wilson, and he can barely even walk. It's kind of insane. Like, I genuinely was like on the edge of my seat, biting through all my nails. Like, there's no way in hell that he is making it through this. That he's sort of saving the day.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that he does manage to, but the movie, again, you don't ever feel like that's a cheat. You don't feel like, okay, well, that was contrived, or like, you know, sort of thing. He is genuinely sort of clever enough that he's able to sort of
Yeah,
get
because
the
he
best
gets
of
the
them.
little thing
Yeah,
from their throat
sort
and
of,
uses it as like a whistle.
exactly, to sort of lure them out. He uses that against them. Which even like, touching on that for a second, that whole like horrible sound that they make as like their means of communication was a sort of brilliant. I thought it was sort of brilliant touch of like sound design. Because it really sort of builds. You hear these like sort of tribes people before you ever really see them. And it's a sort of really nightmarish, awful sound.
Yeah, it
That,
makes them a bit less human, which makes them even
exactly.
scarier.
Yeah, exactly. And it is like I appreciate the fact that it is just it's just people and people. But the movie does really sell the fact that it's a large threat. And there is something sort of horrifying about what they're about to face. And then the movie delivers on that as well. Going back to that sort of brutal sequence. And yeah, like in the end, it's kind of a success, but they kind of lose enough of their own people in the process.
Yeah.
That it doesn't. It feels like it feels like it's a struggle. And you genuinely think you're like, okay, well they are lucky to be alive.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well because the kind of tribes people that die are all just shot.
Yeah.
But the people that the tribes people kill are killed in horrible ways.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah.
Like even like Kurt Russell when he gets like the hip flask and they like put it inside him and it's just
I know, and he's still alive for a good while after that.
Yeah, and I remember because I kind of like not forgot about it, but the scene had progressed and then it pulled out a wee bit and it was still just sitting in his side, and I was like, oh, hi.
Yeah, I'm sure he didn't forget.
Yeah.
But I do also appreciate the fact that even though the movie it does go to these sort of extreme moments of like tension and dread and horror, I also love the fact that scene to scene you don't really know where the movie's going to take you, because there's that bit where they're sort of imprisoned in the enemy cells and the old man starts talking about the flea circus, and it's just a really like surprisingly light and sort of slightly funny nice moment that you do not expect the movie. And it's again I appreciate like the sort of bravery of the movie to do that, to sort of so carefully construct this like sequence of tension, and then in the middle of it to go, actually I'm going to make you feel a bit kind of like light and happy.
Yeah, because it just makes you feel even worse when they come back.
Exactly, yeah, and it genuinely makes you like you're sort of falling in love with these characters all the more as you're like, oh my god, they're probably going to die in a really really horrible way. But yeah, I think it does a lot outside the usual Western fare. And yeah, I was really impressed. It just I think I've seen it on like streaming services and I've seen it kind of like falsely categorized a few times in like different things. But I think that's kind of fair because the movie does a lot of different things, fires in a lot of sort of different cylinders. And I think it does a sort of beautiful job of making that work. Of it never feels like the movie's trying to be too many things. It never feels like unnatural when it sort of swings from like a lighter scene to a darker scene. It's always quite convincing. I felt.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that was interesting. Another interesting movie, if you could call it that, was 2001's Mulholland Drive, which is by David Lynch, who I think is notorious for just either not having genre or taking it and then just going in whatever direction that he wants. And I think this movie's a good example of that. I haven't seen a lot of his movies, I've seen this and I've seen Blue Velvet. But yeah, I think Mulholland Drive was a really weird, it's like a notoriously difficult one to try and categorise.
Yeah, I completely agree. Similar to you, I think this might actually be the first David Lynch film I've seen. Although I have seen like bits of Twin Peaks, so I'm familiar with his sort of style. But yeah, it is like watching Mulholland Drive. You're just constantly met with this feeling of, what is this film? And it swings around so many different ways and tells what feels a lot of the time like a really incomplete series of like events, and yeah, like I think the crazy thing about it is it manages to work so well. I genuinely was like captivated by a lot of it. I was genuinely like entertained and hooked, and yeah, again, the movie just feels like the movie's doing whatever it wants to, and there's something really sort of hypnotic about that.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think as well, I read a kind of like review or whatnot on it, and it had said it's kind of like a mystery movie where they don't solve the mystery in the end.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I guess there is a sort of large mystery element in it.
Because yeah, there's that kind of, you're trying to figure out who's who and what's going on, and if people are lying, what's real, what's not real, and then in the end, it's just like, not going to tell you.
Yeah, I know. It gives you. It's weird because it feels like the movie's giving you a payoff and it's giving you answers, but at the same time, there's so much left unexplained.
Yep.
And unconcluded, and yeah, there's scenes that seemingly exist for no real purpose and coming like the scene at the start where it's the two men in the Winkies diner, and one of them's telling the other one about a dream he had, about this horrifying sort of man he saw, and then they go outside to investigate, and I got the fright of my life.
So did I.
Watching that scene. But yeah, then those characters are like never, you see like the man who ends up fainting or collapsing, you see him like in one shot basically towards the end of the movie, and that's like it. Like you just don't, there's no explanation of that, there's no returning to it, no real payoff to it. The scenes just sort of exist in and of itself early on in the movie, and yeah, again, it's so strange, and yeah, like the ending sequence, it does feel like it's kind of trying to give you answers, but at the same time, you're just like, I'm getting more confused by by the explanations than I thought it could be.
I think it's definitely not one of those movies that you could kind of watch in the background while you were doing other things.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah,
like, because even if you like zoned out a wee bit and were staring at the window or whatever, and then you come back to it, you'd be like, "What's happening?"
Exactly.
I thought she was someone else. What's happening here?
I know, and even like inside the scenes, there's a bit where I think there's like bits where characters look. I think there's a bit where a character looks over, sees a different character. It cuts back to like the character who'd looked, cuts back again, and then she's looking at herself, and then it's like you're inside a different scene basically.
Yeah.
And just again, like I mean, the movie means that stuff like that means that the movie never loses your interest, because you're just like, okay, anything could happen at any possible point. And I think there's sort of like I was kind of worried going into it, because I had a vague idea that the movie was going to be a bit weird. I sort of had a vague worry that it was going to come across as quite pretentious and kind of like almost like snobby, but the movie's almost like it's like it has its secrets, and there's something kind of like there's a creepy edge to that, which I wasn't really expecting. I remember sort of being struck by the bit at the start or near the start when the character is named Betty, and she's dropped off by like the sort of two elderly people, and then they're in the car and they're just like kind of laughing to each other, and like again, on paper there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just you're watching it and you're like, this is horrifying.
It was very ominous. Yeah,
and you kind of can't even, because it's not like they say anything ominous. It's not like there's anything. The movie doesn't really show you anything either to make you think of ominous. I don't even know if there's any ominous music, but it just feels, just the act of them laughing and the way it's kind of like, just because it's almost like it's angled to be just so slightly off, and that sort of the subtlety in that is what makes it work so well, because you almost like gaslight yourself. You're almost like, oh wait, am I just imagining that this is a really creepy sequence, or is it a really creepy sequence? That's
true. And then there's that thing where it doesn't, like, you don't see that old couple until like almost the very end of the movie. You don't ever see them again, so there's no like payoff or anything like that from it.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much of like putting something in and then effectively dropping it. I had to look at I think it's really difficult to watch that movie and not to and then immediately look for like deep dives online and just try and find answers. But I looked at like a few different things, kind of like deconstructing it and discussing it, and it's fascinating to see. Like I think one of the interesting things was the movie was originally a TV show, like it was going to be a pilot for a TV show, and they shot a bunch of footage for it, and then it was deemed too weird.
Shocker.
So I think the network kind of pulled it, or like got cold feet, and they turned it into a movie. But I then watched like I then started reading. I've not even finished it. The analysis goes on for like pages and pages and pages, but it's a really sort of beautiful analysis. Weirdly enough, written in the style of the Incredible Hulk speaking. Really, really strange. But yeah, it talks almost as weird as the film, basically. But just goes into talk about like all the, like almost like bit by bit, like breaks down what happens in the movie and what it all means and how it all connects. And it's funny when like, I mean, I'm now very keen to rewatch the movie because I feel like it was one of those films that you get so much out of a rewatch because you start making like connections that you couldn't possibly make on your first go. But yeah, like as for putting it in like a genre box, I honestly like I couldn't even think what you would describe it as.
I read somewhere that there was a tagline for the movie, and it was just the tagline was "A love story in the city of dreams," and then David Lynch himself has refused to discuss it at all. To be I'm not like. People would ask him what kind of genre is it, what's it about, blah blah blah, and he just refuses to talk about it.
I mean, fair play to him. Like I do really respect that and appreciate the fact that he's managed to make something that you can't really put into a box. I'd say, I mean, there is obviously like a sort of love element to it, but if you told someone, oh yeah, watch Mulholland Drive, it's a love story, it's a love movie, if you would be really misselling the sort of feel of the film.
100%.
And even though there is like a love aspect to it, it doesn't. Yeah, the movie doesn't feel sort of sentimental in that way. And again, there's just like it's weird because there's like a sinister edge to the movie, but then there's also like moments that are sort of really funny, and weird and like sort of playful, like the director that goes home and like finds his wife in bed with Billy Ray Cyrus.
Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah. Whoa, like a surprise cameo.
That was that was jarring.
Yeah, and then his reaction is to like just he doesn't even like say anything, and they're almost like offended that he's like walked in, and he just like takes their jewelry and then just really sort of calmly walks through the house, gets like a tub of pink paint, and then just starts like dousing her jewelry in pink paint, and that whole like that's such an absurd way to react to such an already absurd situation. But yeah, it's just absolutely it's such a wild ride. And yeah, you're literally just like, I have no idea where this film is going.
Yeah.
Every single sequence, you're like, I don't even know. Like, this might be a really, really terrifying thing I'm about to watch. This might be a sad thing I'm about to watch. Yeah. It might be a really happy. It might be a really funny. Like the bit where I think probably my favorite sequence in it is the sort of layabouts guy, and he tries to assassinate someone, and
that was really funny.
And obviously just make it look like a suicide, and it's just everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong there, and it's just that again on paper you could so easily do that wrong. I feel you could turn that into a sort of slapstick sequence.
It would be very slapsticky. Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah, that you don't really buy into, but it really reminded me of like when you play a video game. Like, you ever play like a stealth video game? And you're trying to kind of be really quiet, but you rush it, and then you get caught, and you almost like find yourself digging a bigger hole, and you just,
suddenly you're in the center, and there's all these people like swarming around you, and you just have to like fight them all.
Exactly. You're like, how did it all go so wrong? That's exactly what it kind of felt like.
That's so true.
And yeah, it just manages to be like ridiculously absurd, but without ever breaking like the sort of, because it also feels like really human and really real. And it's kind of crazy that it balances the two so well.
It was very difficult to try and interpret. Even the film itself, not even just a genre, it was difficult to
figure
out what was happening.
Yeah, and like you walk away with like such a sort of mixed feeling on it, and not in a bad way, but just in like I don't really know what I just saw and how to sort of feel about that, how to think about it. But you do kind of need to like, when you finish watching it, you're like, okay, I need time for that to digest.
Yeah, that'd be like if someone asked you, oh, what's Mulholland Drive about? You just have to be like, don't know.
Yeah, and I feel that you could ask two different people that, and they would come away with completely different answers.
Yeah.
To me, like it felt like a really good depiction of just what dreaming is kind of like, the sort of madness of it. and I think that's a really difficult thing. Like so many things, there's like so much fiction that goes into like what dreams are like, and and I think so much of the time they kind of get that wrong. I feel like so much fiction kind of like over stylizes dreams or tries to make them too strange and too kind of absurd.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of that's quite difficult with filmmaking as well because of how literal filming is. But I think like Mulholland Drive manages to really capture that constant sense of being in a dream and you don't really know how anything is started or how it's going to end, and it's strange. It's just kind of dropping you in the middle of scenarios, dropping you with characters that you don't really have any context for, any background of, and just kind of keeps rolling, and you kind of just accept it. Like you don't really like I didn't really find myself going like, well, hang on, like I need to know all these characters' backstories.
That's true, yeah.
You kind of just let their actions inform you, and yeah, like at any moment it feels like you could wake up, and it does feel like the sort of movie that like if you don't sit and dive into it, your brain would kind of like shut it out almost because it just has no idea where to like compartmentalize that.
That's true. A weird film, all in all. So our next film styles itself more as like a horror comedy, and that is 2006 film Severance, which was one of your examples, which I think, did you say you'd watched it when you were really young and it just kind of...
Yeah, I watched it, I think I maybe about 14 and it was on TV. I don't even know if I watched it from the start, because as is sort of the way with movies that are on TV, I might have come into it like 15-20 minutes in. But yeah, I had like no real memory of it. All I knew about it was that it was, because I remember it being the first sort of thing that I'd seen like that, where it was like, this is a horror and a comedy, because it does have moments of like, okay, this is really tense, but then also has like a lot of jokes in there. And I mean, horror comedy is sort of like, the two are basically like opposite ends of the spectrum, aren't they? Like making you laugh and making you scared. Tension and laughter, and like, but there is a lot of films in that genre, I think, like subgenre, or a lot of films that have sort of aimed for it. You have like Shaun of the Dead and Cabin in the Woods and stuff. But I think what I appreciate about Severance is, it actually, like, I feel like those movies are more like parodies. They're more sort of pastiches, and they're sort of satires. Whereas like Severance is genuinely just like a horror movie, but then also just throws in a lot of funny sort of jokes and funny moments.
Yep.
And yeah, again, like it's quite an absurd film. I did, yeah, like there's the sequence where they're all sort of talking about, like, they're speculating as to like the background of the place that they're staying, and then it has like expositional sort of background, but done in like the style of like a 1920s film, like silent film, and then another one like sort of like handheld gritty war footage.
Yep.
And yeah, like the movie just sort of is quite bonkers in that way. But at the same time, when it wants to be, it does have like, it opens as a horror. It is still trying to, on the surface, be quite scary, and quite tense. I even quite like, it just has scenes where it sort of plays with like your expectations. Like there's a scene where character Jill wakes up and goes to the bathroom, and you see like a big spider in her back, and and the tension of that is obviously like building as usual. She's going to discover it, and she's going to like freak out, and she's like standing in front of the mirror, sort of checking herself out, and then it crawls up over her shoulder. And I love the fact that she's just like so happy to see it.
Yeah, she's like, oh, hello.
Yeah, and just starts sort of playing about with it. I was like, there's a really nice sort of like, you go from like being sort of like quite tense to, oh, okay, like this is actually like quite fun.
That's funny, because then
again,
immediately after immediately after that is when you get the actual scare.
Exactly, yeah, and yeah, it's that's again the thing that like a lot of horror movies will do, isn't it? Where they'll like build up to like a fake scare, but that, by like shifting the tone completely, does such a good job of like, you then don't expect that scare to come.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean the movie, it's even like, it manages to be like really gory, like the bit where obviously the guy gets his leg stuck in a bear trap, and it's quite like horrible to watch, quite hard to watch.
Yeah.
as they're like constantly wrestling with it and trying to get his leg out. He ends up losing his leg. But then you go from that to, and that's when they're really like, okay, we are in danger here. We're like, our lives are actually like at risk. But then like a minute or so later, you have like Danny Dyer taking the leg and trying to fit it in the fridge.
In a mini fridge.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, you're just kind of watching. You're like, wow, this movie is nuts.
I think it's funny as well because there's that really funny moment later on when they're like barricaded in the house and it's proper. People are being like picked off left, right, and centre, and they're barricaded in the house. And at one point, Danny Dyer's like, "Oh God damn it, I left his leg in the van."
Yeah, that bit really got me actually.
It's so funny because he's so sincere. He's like, "God damn it."
Yeah, I know. After carrying him all that way. Yeah, and it's that sort of like constant changing of gears that I do appreciate in the film. Like it's. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it really compromises the tension for the comedy.
Yeah. I think definitely because you mentioned Shaun of the Dead. I think Shaun of the Dead leans a lot more into the comedy, whereas this one leans a lot more into the horror. Because there's even little small bits like when they're paintballing, and they shoot what they think is one of their colleagues, but then it turns out that it's not, and that's not really acknowledged. It's just a really creepy little like who were they shooting at?
Yeah, exactly. I know. It does. It like it's quite. Yeah. There are just sort of little moments of horror sprinkled in, that do kind of throw you because 1 second they're paintballing, kind of having a laugh, and there's also some like I also thought there was some nice foreshadowing in the film. I liked, and again it like a scene that could so easily go wrong, in execution, but I like there's I can't remember the character's name, but he's basically talking about mines, and then he's talking about guillotines, and they talk about decapitation. He says about Marie Antoinette being able to feel her head in the basket, and how the brain can keep like working for 2 to 3 minutes after you've been decapitated, which of course, and I like almost like slapped myself in the head when I was like, I didn't see the fact that he was going to be decapitated coming, because it's like in retrospect it's so obvious. But
there was that like funny little moment as well where his smug face, where he was looking over at his body and he was like, see.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just such a weird way to play it, but at the same time, like, it does kind of work for the film, and it's like that is another thing that could so easily like just like take you out the film completely, but manages to kind of like sit comfortably in that way. It's a weird like swing that the movie does constantly.
Definitely.
It totally plays it, because you go from that to then having a woman like doused in gasoline and flamethrower while tied to a tree, which was really, really horrible to watch. And
that was
even
very
just think
grim.
about. Yeah, so it's like it's strange how it will go from like one death will be like almost comedic, another one will be like actually like brutal. And then of course you have like the scene at the end as well where they find the actual cabin that they're supposed to be staying in, and the guy, I think it's George, is waiting for them, and he's got like a prototype rocket launcher. And they go out. Well, we've got like four or five men running after them, and he takes out the rocket launcher. And the movie is played as he's like an American character, and there's really this sort of American music, and you're like, okay, well that's it. Like, this is almost like the movie's gonna end on a laugh, and it's gonna end on like, okay, well that's it, problem solved now that they found him. And he fires the rocket, and the rocket just immediately turns upwards and blows up a plane that's passing by. Oh,
that's funny. I forgot it blew up the plane, actually.
Exactly, and then it immediately goes from being like you have a joke, like a genuinely unexpected joke, to then you go, okay, like these characters are in danger again, and that was their potential out that they've now lost. And then it goes back into sort of gripping and dark for its like final moments.
Yeah, I thought it was funny as well. There was a couple of moments where it was very like aware of horror as a genre, where like the character of Maggie, she repeatedly makes sure that the person is dead. Like, she doesn't just kill them and run away. She properly, like, she drops a big rock on someone's head at one point. She shoots another guy in the head. Like, she's taking no chances.
Yeah, I do love that, because it is one of my least favourite things in a horror film when you have they're being chased by a killer, and they have the chance to finish them off, and they just don't, and then the killer comes back, surprise, and they're not done. But
I love that, because it's one of like the rules in Scream, which is like famously like parodying horror movies and like being hysterical and stuff. And that one of the rules is that they're never actually dead, and it happens all the time in Scream movies. But I love that this movie was like, no, she's making sure she's not taking
Yeah,
any chances.
yeah, literally that first kill where the guy's been Danny Dyer stabbed the guy, he's fallen through the floor, and then she just takes the shotgun and blows his brains out. And it was, you're just like, fair enough.
Yeah.
Like the correct way to handle that situation, basically.
Definitely. That's funny. So we'll just move on to our last movie, which is 1998's The Big Lebowski. It's by the Coen brothers, who I think, again, from reading things, they are also quite difficult to categorise. But not maybe in the same way as David Lynch, but more in that they just, again, maybe do that kind of where they like swing wildly from one genre to the other within the movie.
Yeah.
Or like in the case of Big Lebowski, I think they present it as one genre and really it's like underneath it's more of a different genre. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like it's, again, on paper, on the surface, it's sort of like a mystery. There's obviously a crime element, and you sort of have like extortion. You have like ransoms. You have kidnapping, but it basically takes that, like, you know, tropes that you've seen a million times before, but it just gives you the sort of most surreal cast of characters to tell the story with, and as a result, it's just like, it's a really, really strange film. Like the first time I watched it, I was really sort of surprised at the mystery element of it, because I knew all about, like, you know, I knew I had ideas of the movie. I knew about like Jeff Bridges is the dude. So, you know, I knew there was a large comedic element, but I was really surprised at sort of how serious it also took the actual mystery element of it and the crime element. And there was, like, again, like some genuinely surprising twists and turns and a really like strong payoff, I felt. And I kind of like, I've seen like a few Coen Brothers movies, but I was almost quite, because they are another one where it's just like you don't really know where they're taking anything.
Yep.
And I think sometimes, you know, like No Country for Old Men, for instance, doesn't really have a conclusion, doesn't really have like a payoff in the typical sense. So like, having seen that first, I wasn't really expecting any sort of resolution from The Big Lebowski. I was like, well, it's just going to be like a bunch of mental things happening. But I quite liked the fact that it does, and also just despite the fact that Jeff Bridges' character is like the last person, even just like that idea of his character and his character being the one at the center of all this, because he just seems like the last person you would ever find in that sort of movie.
Yep.
And he is also like, when he sort of turns his brain on, he is actually also genuinely competent.
Yeah, it's funny because he's quite like as opposed to John Goodman's character, the dude is very like he seems to have some kind of conscience where he's like, they're going to kill this woman. Like he seems genuinely concerned. He's like, we need to help because this woman's going to die. And then the other character's like, Walter, I think his name is. He's like, nah, we'll just steal the money and whatnot.
Yeah, I love it. And I love like just the whole thing of it's dumb people making dumb decisions.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite sequences where they go, is it they think that his car turns up and he knows that he'd left the briefcase in it with what they thought was like the bribe, and they go to the guy's house.
To the schoolboy.
Yeah, and they end up trashing the car outside because they think it's his, and he's bought it with like the stolen money. And it turns out to be someone else's car entirely. And it's such.
I love even that whole like interrogation scene is so funny, where the boy's just sitting there on the couch and his like dad's behind him on like a big iron lung thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hilarious. And again, it sort of plays into those like tropes of like a mystery and having like interrogation and stuff. But it's just like the movie just doesn't take itself seriously, but at the same time does kind of take itself seriously. It's like really almost like contradictory in a lot of ways, the film. But again, like it's genuinely handled like really, really well. And yeah, like it is. Yeah, you really like you do end up like really caring for the dude and enjoying his plight.
I think as well, I thought Julianne Moore's character was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like every
Yeah,
time
she's
she was on
brilliant.
screen, she was so funny. I think as well, it was
I
really
know.
funny. I read like it was really like compelling, an argument that Big Lebowski was basically film noir.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. And they made such good points. So there's like the mystery element where there's a kidnap of this young gorgeous woman, and then someone's brought in to deal with it basically. So the dude, um, there's like there's ideas of like the femme fatale, which would be Julianne Moore's character, or
Yeah.
Bunny Lebowski. There's also, I thought a really good comment was that in like old Humphrey Bogart movies and stuff, he was always wearing like a trench coat and a fedora, whereas the dude's always wearing like his dressing gown and a pair of sandals. Where it's similar
Yeah.
in that sense. So he's like his own like Humphrey Bogart character, but it's funny because it's like a stoner comedy.
Yeah, exactly. I know, and it's yeah, it's such like a strange way to like turn those tropes on their heads. Yeah, I like wasn't aware of all those connections. I've not actually seen that much in the way of film noir, but I do. Yeah, I do love the fact that they've done that, and like especially the trench coat versus his
The dressing
gown. Yeah, he just looks like the least competent, least professional, least like bothered person
Yeah.
who could ever be caught up in something so
It's funny,
serious
there
and
was
sort of.
sometimes I was watching it and I was like, God, he is so chill. Like, I wish I was just a little bit as chill as he is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he just has a very like zen way of life, and yeah, like you really again, it's really hard not to fall in love with the character.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I almost like went into the film thinking, oh, I'm not really going to care that much for this character because he's so iconic, and
Yeah.
I think that sometimes there's so many movies I've seen where their legacy has sort of destroyed their impact because you're just like, okay, well, like I can't possibly live up to all the like all the
All the
things that have
hype,
like praised
basically.
it and yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think because the character is just like so chill and just kind of wants to just be left in his own sort of peaceful existence.
Yeah.
It's hard not to kind of like really root for him and get on his side.
It's funny as well because even
Um,
like when people break into his house, he's in the bath and he's like, mate, what you doing? This is...
Yeah, exactly. He's just yeah, like really sort of unperturbed in the traditional sense. Yeah, exactly. And I do. Yeah, I think there's a line in there, isn't there, about like being more like the dudes. And you really kind of wish you were like just you were
Yeah.
able to just
Maybe not quite to
be
that
that.
extent, but even just a wee bit.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit more like being able to just like take everything on the chin and brush everything off and just like yeah, be so content
Yeah.
in such like a sort of simple life.
Funny. I think as well, like the bit at the end when what's his name? Steve Buscemi's character, like he like dies and he's their friend,
Yeah.
and then they very quickly just get over it and go bowling.
Yeah, exactly.
But it
And
doesn't.
even like
It doesn't seem like
sorry.
callous or anything. It just is very much
Yeah.
like that's just what they do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was like a genuine surprise. You don't didn't I didn't expect like a fatality in the film.
Yeah.
And yeah, even like the sort of sequence where they go and like scatter the ashes is it's brilliant just because it feels really real. And you have these characters that like again are just really sort of absurd and don't feel like they could be real, but at the same time the whole time you're watching them you totally buy into them and believe them. And yeah, like that sequence where they try and scatter the ashes and the wind just blows it back on them. It's just like
I love that it doesn't, not a speck touches Walter and it just goes all over the dude. Oh no, he gets a wee bit on his shoulder and he's like, oh god damn it.
yeah, exactly. And it's such like a yeah sort of macabre joke to have in there.
Yeah.
But again, it's just something so clumsy about it that just feels really real. And that's the thing that's in it sort of consistently is just like really dumb moments and really like yeah, just dumb sequences, but at the same time like it feels like a really intelligently made, intelligently written, intelligently acted movie.
I think so as well. I thought as well because when you think of like stoner comedies, you would think of things like Knocked Up, which is
Yeah.
very like cheap laughs,
Yep.
which are funny,
Exactly.
but they're a bit like, and then you just move on.
Yeah, that's it. And like, yeah, like they take the label of like stoner comedy to mean, okay, well, we don't really have to try that much in the way of like plot,
Yep.
or things going on. Like, really, people are coming for the laughs and to just have a good time. So we can just as long as we have some jokes in there, and it kind of feels like, yeah, it usually feels like there's a lot of ad-libbing going on.
It's normally
And that's
just
like,
everyone laughing at their own jokes.
yeah, exactly, and patting themselves in the back. Whereas like the Big Lebowski just sort of feels like you're getting like a snapshot of like people's lives that is funny, but they don't even realize how funny it is.
Yep. I think as well, you're talking about ad-libbing. I'm sure I read somewhere that the Big Lebowski was very, like, they had to stick to the script very strictly, so that even like the amount of times they say dude was all scripted. Absolutely everything that they said was in the script.
Oh wow.
Which I think's
Yeah.
it really interesting, especially after you just said that stoner comedies now are mostly just like ad-libbing, people thinking they're
Exactly.
funny kind of
It
thing.
just feels like, yeah, it feels like the director and the actors turn up on set and they're like, well, we're just gonna have fun making the movie and hopefully that'll translate through to the movie. But yeah, it's especially watching a film like The Big Lebowski with a character so carefree. It's kind of mental to think that they were on set and they're like, we're gonna religiously stick to this bit of text.
Which I think goes
it's
to show that Jeff Bridges was great in it. So was like everyone that was in it was great, which
Yeah,
definitely
exactly.
added to it, obviously.
Yeah, no, all the actors put in a brilliant performance and a really memorable performance, a really sort of different performance. And it's one of the things that's kind of, I think there's been some talk this year about like the Oscars finally starting, not that the Oscars are the be all and end all, but like starting to sort of appreciate like comedic acting. And I think comedic acting is the sort of thing that isn't really talked about enough, isn't really appreciated enough because and I guess it's because like probably for the fact that a lot of it is ad libbing and a lot of people just kind of like goofing about on sets and stuff like that. But I think to sort of take comedic acting and comedic characters so seriously, yeah, you really do. Like, they are great performances in that film.
Yep.
You don't have like characters like delivering these like epic soliloquies or really like pouring their heart out, but you totally believe that these like absurd characters are real.
Yeah.
And you really really care for them, and every sort of line delivery is nailed, every sort of like moment is nailed, every reaction is nailed. And I think that's really tough to do, and to make something so scripted feel so authentic.
Yeah, very well done. I think I would definitely, like, I've seen there was that Coen Brothers film that was recently that was put on Netflix maybe last year. It was kind of like it was like a movie, like a feature length, but it was like different shorts basically in the one movie.
Was this The Ballad of Buster Scruggs?
That's it. Yeah, I watched that and I
forgot
enjoyed
about
that, and now I've watched this. So I think I would definitely. Coen Brothers aren't someone that I've tended to watch, but I think I would definitely give them a go.
Yeah, I've had kind of a mixed response with Coen Brothers. I've not seen that many of their films. I wasn't really big on. I think No Country for Old Men was like their biggest one. That I was like, oh, I have to watch this movie, and I wasn't really that impressed by it. There were like scenes in it that I absolutely loved, but overall, like, I didn't really like care for the movie that much. I think because of that, I've kind of been like I don't know how much. I think I've seen like bits and pieces of like a bunch of their films, and I've kind of been like, I don't know how much the Coen Brothers are for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really, really was like impressed by The Big Lebowski, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is another one actually that like I really loved. So I feel like they also have like quite a varied library of films that is probably worth me checking more of them out.
Yeah.
And because there probably is, like, I mean, if I've loved two of their things, then there's definitely more in there that I'd really enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a good place to wrap up though. So thank you, Sam. I think next
Anytime.
time is your hosting. So I'm excited to see or hear what you come up with.
Disappoint.
I know, no pressure. But no, I'm happy with that. If you're happy, we'll just say goodbye.
I'm indeed. Yeah, I feel like we've got a lot of good thoughts put out in a good amount of time.
Definitely.
Covered a lot of ground there.
And I think definitely if there's anything in particular that anyone would want to hear us blabbing on about for an hour, just fire away and then we could decide whether it was good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Let us judge you.
Yeah, exactly. But no, yeah, other than that, we will see you in 2 weeks.
Farewell.
See ya.